Okay, the next set of ratios is primarily focusing on the performance or the efficiency. So more of ops department, where when I say profitability ratios, probably the focus is more on marketing or the sales. Whereas when I focus on performance ratios, it's more on operations. How well a particular activity is being managed. How well these particular activities are being controlled. Right? So some of the things which are focused here is the asset turnover. All turnover ratios are what are associated with the operation. So just when I say asset turnover, the focus is more towards sales, because operation job will end once something is produced which is ready for sale. Right? From there the marketing picks up. If we look at the typical company's roles and responsibilities, until something is purchased and given, it's the finance or the purchase department. How well you negotiate and all that stuff. How much you raise as a capital and all that stuff. Once you purchase it, or once you have something in place, it's the operations department that comes into picture to produce something, production or operations, anything. So how well you produce it or use the resources to generate the sales. And from there the marketing picks up at what price you will sell it to generate the profit. Three key departments in a company. Rest all are the supporting departments. Right? Finance is involved in raising finance, getting things in place, finance plus purchase. Then using those, producing the output is what is the operations. Using that output, generating the sales and cash profit is what is the marketing or sale. The key departments in any company. Rest all will support these departments to typically maximize the potentials. Right? So the performance ratios or efficiency ratios are more targeted towards that part. So we are looking at different kinds of assets, how well the assets are used to generate the sales. So one such ratio is sales to total assets, which will tell me for every 1 rupee that I have, see when I say ROA, for every 1 rupee I have invested in the asset, how much profit did I make? Whereas if I say how much sales did I make, that becomes a performance ratio. So how well the assets are utilized to produce something which is ready for sale. Right? How well the assets are utilized to produce something that is ready for sale. So the higher the ratio is, the better it is, because the asset utilization is much better in the company. So these all talk about the utilization aspect. Right? So in this case, I will get something like sales divided by total assets. Sales divided by total assets, which will tell, so every 1 rupee of asset is generating 2 rupees of sales. So over the past it has gone down slightly. But yeah, compared to the last 1-2 years, you see the number will be more or less in the same region. Because nothing can be, nothing can drastically change. Right? Asset, if it is changed, then there is something big transformation that has happened in the company. So that is the reason for doing valuations, these ratios are taken as yardstick. Obviously, the sales to asset ratio may not change in future also. If it had not changed that drastically in the last 4-5 years, how can I expect that it will change? I am not an internal guy who is bringing a drastic change in the company. I am an external analyst who is trying to look at the initial numbers and based on that taking a decision. So for last 3 years the number is around 1.8 to 1.9. So even the next few years I will expect it around that number itself, which would be a logical assumption, right? That's how I make the future statements, future balance sheets and the income statements completely interlinked through these ratios. The more the pattern consistency exists, I'll use these numbers for the forecasting purpose. I can still say this number around 1.9 for the next 5 years. So the moment I forecast the sales, I can forecast the assets. So some balance sheet number is coming up. So like that, wherever the uniformity or more or less proximity exists, I'll try to depend more on those numbers for my forecasting purpose. Right? Alright, so again this number has to be compared with the industry as well as competitors. The higher the number is, the better it is. Right? Because your assets are utilized more effectively. And yeah, from here starts how good is my inventory management. Now, different assets I am looking at. So this is the total asset utilization. Now I am breaking them into different utilizations. How good is my inventory management system? Right? What is the inventory part? For some amount which I have purchased or produced, how much is still lying in my inventory? If I have produced 20 rupees, how much is still lying in the inventory? How much of it I was able to sell? How much is still lying in the inventory? Right? So that's where we are using cost of goods sold, because here inventory's role will be up to taking it up to sales, production part. Right? You can very well define it with respect to sales also. There are two different definitions. You can define it with respect to sales also. For every these many rupees you have sold, how much is still lying in your inventory? That is when you do it with respect to sale. But the more decent definition is take it with respect to cost of goods sold rather than the sales. So if I take it with respect to cost of goods sold, here the cost of goods sold for me is the summation of these three. The summation of these three is my cost of goods sold. Materials, right, divided by the inventory. The inventory for this period is this much. What are we interpreting from this? For every 4.66, see, it is nothing but COGS by total inventory, right? So COGS by total inventory is 4.66. I can very well write it as 4.66 by 1. Correct? So what is that meaning? For every 4.66 rupees of my COGS, which is for every 4.66 rupees of production which I have done, 1 rupee is still lying in my inventory. The higher the ratio is, the better it will be. My inventory management is very good. Because if it is 20, for every 20 rupees I have produced, 1 rupee is in the inventory. So which means 19 rupees has been sold. Whereas if the ratio is lesser, for every 4.6 rupees I am produced, 3.5 I am able to sell, 1 rupee is still lying in my inventory. So there is a huge percentage that is lying in the inventory. Correct? There is a huge proportion that is lying in the inventory. So the higher there is, so again comparison, okay, at least it has improved. If I look at from this company's standpoint, it has improved, which means the company is doing inventory management better compared to the previous years. The first conclusion that comes out is the company is doing a better inventory management compared to the previous years. Right? But The best thing comes when I compare it with the competitors and the industry. Fine. So inventory management has improved in this company's case, but I have to look at it with respect to the competitor as well as with respect to the industry. One step. Now the other side. How is the debtors, which is the accounts receivable management? So collections. How good is the company with respect to the collections? Okay, it is doing our credit management. It is doing some credit sales. Agreed. Fine. But to what extent it is successful in the collections? So for every some rupees of sales it has done, how much is collected, how much is yet to be collected? Right? So if I simply look at this is sales by total receivables. So where I am taking it as sales is this number divided by the total receivables, trade receivables is this one. So what is this telling me? For every 30 rupees I have sold, 1 rupee is pending. 29 rupees I have collected, 1 rupee is pending. Whereas recently it is for every 32 rupees I have sold, 1 rupee is still pending to be received. I have received 31 rupees in the form of cash. Only 1 rupee is yet to be received for every 32 rupees. So the higher the ratio is, the better it is. Because if the ratio is 50, for every 50 rupees, only 1 rupee is yet to be received, remaining 49 rupees I have received. So even from that case also, yeah, compared to the last 2 years, it has very much improved with respect to its receivables management. Right, even the debtors wise, so credit must, but the accuracy will come when I compare it only with respect to the industry. So all these we have to make sure that the comparisons are done with respect to the industry as well as the past and the competitors. All three have to be done to arrive at our solution. Then how much is with respect to investment? Every item of the asset I am looking at how much effective, right? So investments I am looking at same logic, sales divided by investments. So which one I have to focus more on is what is the item here. So there are non-current investments. So this is what is my investment. So which means for every 28 rupees of my sale, 1 rupee is invested somewhere else. So 27 rupees is in my core business, 1 rupee is somewhere else in non-core, in some other investments. So again in this case also, the higher the ratio is, the better I am doing into my core business. Here you see for every 118 rupees of sale the company has generated, 1 rupee is in some other business, is in investments, remaining 117 rupees is in the same company. So the higher the ratio is, the more core you are focusing on. Again, comparison with respect to the competitor and the industry. Similarly, the tangible assets, the fixed assets, both tangible as well as intangible and capital work in progress, all of them, how much are they? Which means for every 1 rupee of investment in that fixed assets, how much of sales they are generating. So your office, building, material, and machineries, what sales they are able to generate, which means what is the effectiveness of those assets, right? So sales divided by the fixed assets, this is my fixed asset. So for every 1 rupee of investment in the fixed asset, which is like your plant, property, equipment, buildings, vehicles, they are generating 8 rupees of sales. or they are generating 9.35 rupees of sale. So again talking about your asset utilization. Right? Total assets are generating 2 rupees of sale. Only the fixed assets, if I am looking at, almost 9.35 rupees of sales are generated by them, which is improving. So the assets are put to very good use. The fixed assets are put to very good use. 9 rupees of sale. Because this is sales by fixed assets. So 9.35 by 1. Sales is 9.35, fixed assets is 1. So for every 1 rupee of investment in the fixed assets, 9.35 rupees of sale is being done. Probably simply put, let's say I look at this person as a fixed asset. Right? I am paying him some salary. For that salary, for every 1 rupee of salary which I am paying to him, he is generating 9 rupees of sales. So he is put to a very good use. Like that, see, for a manufacturing company, the machines, the plants, the buildings, right? They are all the key. Vehicles, whatever. They are all the key in terms of generating the sales. So how effective they are? Because all these ratios are efficiency oriented ratios. Right? How effective they are. Correct? Now. That asset turnover ratio is 1.925. You need to say that for every 1 rupee. For every 1 rupee in total assets, they are able to generate 1.92 of sales. Yeah, these all are divided by 1. So numerator is sales, denominator is total assets. See, you always put whatever the ratio that is created, you directly put it as by 1. Easier to correlate. So that numerator will be equal to that number, denominator will be equal to 1. Then you can very well correlate. Right? Then, okay, we'll come to the working capital wise. Then payables turnover, which is now from a liability standpoint. All these are different assets. How well the different assets are put to use. How well the asset management. One, we are looking at a broad level, total asset. Then each of the core assets we have looked at. Receivable, debtors, inventory, investments, fixed assets. These are the core assets of the company. So how well they are utilized. We have broken the total assets down and we have looked at them individually. Then the liabilities wise also, especially with respect to your creditors. How well you are managing your creditors is another important aspect. Right? So for every X rupees of purchase, how much you still need to pay? How much you have already paid to them? How much you still need to pay? If you are still need to pay a big amount, then it looks like you are getting proper credit terms from your vendor. Now if I compute it in this case, the cost of goods sold by the current liabilities part. So the cost of goods sold, especially creditors. I mean, I don't take all current liabilities. Probably here I'll only look at creditors or accounts payable only. So here cost of goods sold which will be the summation of all these three. Cost of goods sold divided by your creditors. Creditors are coming up here. These are your creditors. Right? So what do I say from this? For every 1.93 rupees of purchase I have done, 1 rupee is yet to be paid. I have paid only 0.93 rupees. 1 rupee is yet to be paid. So there is a huge amount which I am yet to pay. Here it is saying for every 2.5 rupees of purchase, 1 rupee is yet to be paid. Only 1.5 I have paid. One rupee is yet to be paid. Looks like I got a big leverage term. The lesser the number is, I'm getting big leverage, big benefit. Because if it says if this value is 50, for every 50 rupees of purchase, 1 rupee is yet to be paid. 49 rupees I have already paid. So I am not getting better credit terms. My vendors are having better control on me. Here I am having better control on the vendors. But of course, compared to the past, this number has gone up. So slightly the vendors are putting some pressure on me. But still the number is much lesser. Right? For every 2.5 rupees, 1 rupee is yet to be paid. Means 40% is almost yet to be paid. Only 60% I have paid. Which is a very good leverage. Because from my buyer standpoint, I don't have that much leverage. For every 32 rupees, only 1 to be collected. So I am doing the collection from my customers very fast. But to my vendors, I am paying very slow. Which is, I am getting a good leverage in the middle. My customer management is very tight. Whereas vendors also I am able to handle very much. They are not very tight with me. Because I am the customer to my vendors. They are not that tight with me, but I am very tight with my customers. So the cash which I am getting is very comfortable. From my vendors I am collecting very fast. From my customers I am collecting very fast. But to my vendors I am paying very slow. So there's a lot of cash that is available with me in the process. Probably I could invest this cash somewhere else and even get a benefit. Right? That is what we come across with these three ratios. The receivable days. Sometimes even this is called as average collection period. Probably I'll use a better term. Average collection period. And this is called as days of inventory on hand, DOH. And this is called as average payment period. Because these are US names basically. I mean the receivable days and payable days and all, they are US names, but these are the most commonly used Indian names. What is the average collection period? Which means how many days on an average it is taking to collect from my customers. Collect cash after a sale is being made. On an average, how many days it is taking to collect the cash? See, in some cases I will collect it immediately because it's a cash transaction. In some cases I will collect after 30 days. In some cases I will collect after 60 days. On an average, what is the collection period? The lesser the collection period, the faster I am getting the cash out of my sales, which is coming out through 365 divided by your debtors turnover ratio. So I am simply looking at it as 365 divided by this debtors turnover, which is coming out as 11.83, which means on an average it is taking 11.83 days to collect cash from my customers. See, this is average, because some customers where I have done a cash sale, it is immediate, 0 days. Some customers I may have done credit sales. From them it is probably taking 30 days. On an average it is taking around 11 days to collect the cash from my customers. Even now it is around 11.2 days. So within 11.2 days, cash is coming from my customers. Right? The lesser the number is, my customer management process is much better. So the intention should always be to reduce the average collection period. the lesser and lesser the collection period, I am confident about the money which I am going to get. Either I have already got it, or even if some NPS will come up, they will be very, very less. So the bad debts and all, if at all they come up also, it would be very, very less. Because the collection is only, very little has to be collected compared to my total sale. Very little needs to be collected. So even if I have to consider as bad debt, it's fine. The risk will be much, much lesser. Then similarly, there is a definition of days of inventory on hand. On an average, how many days it is taking for any inventory to be ready for sale. Any inventory to be ready for sale. See, inventory is the moment it comes into the store, I am treating it as an inventory. It can come as raw material, it can come as a semi-finished good, or it could be my finished good itself. Anything, on an average, how many days it is lying as a part of my inventory before getting sold. Right? That is what is the days of inventory on hand, which will come out as 365 divided by your inventory turnover ratio. So which is telling me that on an average, it is taking 98 days for my inventory to get sold. Either to become a finished good and then get sold, whatever it is. So right from a raw material, probably getting converted into a finished good and probably get sold, on an average it is taking around 98 days. Now around 78 days. So I have actually reduced by almost 20 days in terms of inventory on hand. See, I may have to maintain a very large inventory. See, sometimes you just stock up. See, probably in this case, HUL's case, they may have produced so many goods, they may have simply stocked up. The sale would happen at slightly later date. So on an average, it is taking around 78 days for them. Right from the moment the inventory has, it is treated as inventory to getting sold. Probably at wholesalers location, you see big stocks just getting stocked up. Right? So to really get sold, it may take a, so really getting sold means it's actually moving through a wide large set of chain, from the company to the wholesaler to the retailer to finally the customer. That is when it is actually getting sold. So it's taking a big time, around 70. Probably the industry itself could be like that. We have to check it out with respect to the other companies in the industry also. That's the reason they are maintaining a very heavy inventory. Right? Otherwise, probably you may get some bulk order which you may have to supply. Unless you maintain that much of inventory, you will lose that customer. Right? So that could be the reason the inventory. Probably if you compare it with some other industry, let's say an automobile industry or something, this number will be totally different. Right? So the inventory may not be that heavy. They may not produce so many bikes and keep them in the store for selling for so much time. It would be a turnover could be much, much better there. So that process also needs to be looked at. Then that is what will give me my operating cycle. Operating cycle typically says average collection period plus days of inventory on hand, which means right from raw material stage to production, ready to sell, is the days of inventory on hand. From there, selling is happening to the collection of cash is the average collection period. So right from something got into production to the collection is what is called as operating cycle. So the operating cycle, so which means typically it is taking, it used to take 109 days from the entry of raw material, from the entry of the raw material till the collection of cash. Now it is only 89 days. So within 89 days, you are able to produce it, sell it, collect the cash from it. On an average, it is taking around 89 days cycle to get your cash. That is what is the operating cycle. So the lesser the operating cycle is, the faster you are able to collect the cash. Now the other side, the average payment period is, what is the time on an average it is taking to pay to your vendors, which is 365 divided by your payable turnover, which is coming out as 365 divided by the payable turnover. So on an average you are taking 188 days to pay to your vendor. So for some vendors you are paying very fast, some of them very slow, but on an average you are taking around 188 days. Now it has come down to 143 days. So logic wise, now if you see, what is this payment to a vendor? You have got the raw materials from the vendor. Look at a simpler step. You have got the raw materials from the vendor, right? From this day, the day you have purchased the raw material from the vendor, from this day you have to make the payment to him in 143 days. Correct? You have to make the payment to him on an average in 143 days. But the moment the raw material has come into your store, you are taking around 78. Yeah, you are taking around 78 days to make it ready for sale, and you are selling it. Ready for sale is even stocking it in your godown also, warehouse, store, everything, until it is sold, right? And from sale, it's taking on an average around 11 days to get the cash. So almost within 80 days, this raw material which you have purchased from your vendor, you are able to produce it, sell it, get cash also out of it. Still after this, you have another 63 days, or this is what, 90, right? Still you have another 53 days to make the payment to your vendor. So this 53 days is your leverage area. See, if this is not there, so here what are we doing? I am paying to my vendor from the same material which I have got from him. So for buying the raw materials, I really don't need any extra money, because I am paying it to him from whatever the raw material I am producing it, selling it, getting the cash, then paying it to him. So no need to borrow for paying to my vendor. Let's say if the average payable period is only 60 days, then I have to borrow to pay to him, because on an average it takes 90 days for me to collect out of that raw material, but my vendor is demanding in 60 days. So how will I pay? Either I have to block my cash or borrow for short term for 1 month, 2 months, whatever it is, and then pay to my vendor. So if at all this number always is like this, if your operating cycle, which is the summation of these two, is lesser than your average payable period, there is always an advantage. You don't need to take a working capital loan, Right? This is what is the necessity for a working capital loan. If at all I have to pay to my vendor within 30 days or 45 days, whereas I will collect my cash only in 90 days. So I need to take a short term loan, at least for 60 days or something. I need to take a short term loan. With that money, pay to my vendor, then get the cash. Probably on that, pay interest to the bank for that 2 months. So there will be a kind of extra payments which I am doing. But in this case, there is another benefit. For this 53 days, I can invest that cash for a 53-day period in some small term investments. In short term investment, I can do for 53-day period, get some extra return on that, which could increase my profitability also. Or I can even negotiate with my vendor. I'll pay you in 90 days. Would you give me some kind of credit? That is what is called as trade credit. I'll give you in 90 days. Give me 1 or 2% discount. So if he agrees to that, or some percentage, whatever you talk of, if he agrees to that percentage, if you find it is beneficial more than you investing it for 53 days and getting an extra return, if you think the deal, the vendor's deal is much better, the discount is much bigger, you will go with paying it off in 90 days itself. Otherwise, you will think of investing it and then using it for the payment purpose on the last day itself. Right? So this will talk about the performance of the company. So this is more of a working capital management or short term. The short term capital management, which is more like a working capital management of the company. Sorry? Yeah, operations part, because this entire thing is as a part of your operations itself. Operations where we are talking of performance or the efficiency of the operations. So the moment we see these kind of numbers, we can very well confidently say that the company's performance is much better with respect to the day-to-day operations. It does not require a working capital loan also. It is very well in a comfortable position to pay its vendors from its business itself, which is a good stuff. I am able to handle my vendor in such a way that I can pay him from my business itself. I don't need to do a borrowing to pay to him. So my cash is not getting blocked in the process. Right? But again, the similar comparisons have to be done again with the industry and the competitors also. Because in isolation, none of these numbers have a good meaning. Probably, see, I can say these all are looking like great to me. But when I look at the competitor, they may look at normal. All of them will have the same numbers. Then it may look like, oh, this is normal in this industry itself. Right? So the leverage will come only when this company is extremely different from others. Or extremely in sense at least 5-10% different from others. If more or less the industry is like that only, there is nothing much I can say as a positive about this, because all the companies in the industry are like this. So which means all of them are equally efficient. So they are all good competitors as far as operations are concerned. But the moment I see the ratios are big different, the numbers are big different, then I am getting a leverage. If these guys are doing much better, because over the period they have reduced drastically. Right? Their operating cycle has come down from 109 to almost 89. Of course, in the middle they have gone up slightly. Right? But overall, compared to the last 5 years, they are minimum this year. So their management, the short-term management is much better, has improved. Now I have to see whether everyone else also has improved, or is it only this company. That is what will give me the leverage. Right? So the cash conversion cycle is nothing but the how many days, even by adding an operating cycle minus payable days. So the high negative the value is, the better it is, because my cash is converted much faster and I have so much of leverage in terms of payment. So where I am looking at operating cycle minus the payable days. So right now I am having almost a 54-day leverage. So I can invest this cash for almost 54 days in some other investment, earn some return, and then pay to my vendor. Otherwise, I can negotiate with my vendor for a better rate. Right? So this is the way we evaluate the operations or performance part of the company.